Chances are, if you clicked on this video, you are in some way involved or interested in the beauty space on social media. And if that's you, chances are you have come across one of your favorites or not so favorite beauty content creators going on a lavish, a luxe brand trip to some exotic place. And let's be honest, that can evoke some emotions and some opinions, from envy to criticism to genuinely being happy for the people that are on the trip. What I find most fascinating is how in 2024, the backlash that follows these trips, like Trippin with Tarte, with the caviar and the private jets and the champagne, how this backlash keeps happening, but yet these brand trips continue in the same format. And what I wonder is, will the backlash eventually overtake the benefit for brands to do these trips? Is there a better way to still do brand trips, but have them not be so cringy? And in that, will the lessening of the cringe lead to more sales for the brand and making that return on investment higher for them? Today, we are talking about brand trips and why brands splurge on these extravagant getaways. Why is there a growing backlash against the brands and the influencers that go on these trips? And to add to this discussion, I have something very special for you today. I was able to talk to a brand owner that was possibly the very first brand to have a brand trip with influencers all the way back in 2011. What did brand trips look like then? And what can Tarte and NARS and Kosas and all these other brands that are doing brand trips now learn from that original brand trip, what I believe is the original brand trip? In the end, is there a way to revamp this so that it isn't so cringy? If you're interested in that topic like I am, let's talk about it. Hang tight, we're getting into it right now. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to my channel. If you've never been here before, hi, my name is Jen. This channel is called JENLUV, and on this channel, we mostly focus on makeup news, things happening in the industry, and also looking at things that happened in the past, things that are currently happening in the industry. How do we feel about them, and how can we as a community encourage things to be better? If you like that type of content, you may want to consider subscribing if you are not already subscribed, so that my videos show up in your subscription inbox when I make a new one. That being said, let us start where I think we have to start. We're starting with Trippin with Tarte. If you are not familiar with Trippin with Tarte, don't worry about it. I got you. I'm going to explain it real quick. So basically, Tarte started these brand trips back in 2015, where they invited influencers to go, all expenses paid, in order to promote products. One of the first ones that I remember, if not the very first one, was promoting the Tarte Shape Tape. And that was a concealer that immediately went viral at launch. All the beauty influencers were using it, and it also gave Tarte the in of, yeah, these beauty trips actually work. And since 2015, Tarte continues to do these lavish luxury trips for influencers all the way until very recently, just a few months ago in late February, early March of 2024. The trip was to Bora Bora, and it was presented the way that they're all presented, where you've got 30 influencers. They're flown out to this luxurious location. They're given swag. There's different activities, and they're encouraged to post about their trip while they're there. What really set this off before the trip even started was, if you ain't got no money, take your broke ass home. That quickly became the theme for the trip, at no fault of Tarte. It was a TikTok that was uploaded by a creator named Abby Buffo, who has close to 900,000 followers on TikTok. The video is currently sitting at 2.3 million views, and people were pissed. Roll the clip, Bob. So Ariana Jasmine, she has 220,000 followers on TikTok, and I mentioned that because she does have quite a wide reach. She said kind of what everybody else was thinking, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people were thinking. Here's her TikTok in response.
Tarte just took a bunch of influencers on this all-exclusive trip to Bora Bora, and it is so freaking lavish, and they're coming under fire for that TikTok amongst other different things too. But during a time where many people are getting laid off, many people are paycheck to paycheck, actually more than 60% of America lives paycheck to paycheck, they are flaunting this trip and making content like fanning their tickets. Oh, if you ain't got no money, take your broke ass home. I have a degree in public relations, and I worked in public relations for years before I started my platform, so I kind of want to talk about this. The end goal of this trip is so that more people see Tarte and they buy Tarte. This Tarte trip is actually turning people off from the brand. Former PR major, I don't really understand how that logic works because it's so freaking tone deaf. So many people are struggling to put food on the table, and y'all are flaunting the private jet, the trip, all of the expensive free goodies that you got.
Due to Ariana's reach and other people who posted this particular TikTok and their reactions to it, this TikTok became the face of the Bora Bora trip. At least for people who weren't watching it closely, people who weren't following the people on the trip. About a week after the video went live, Abby did post an apology of sorts underneath the video. It was in response to a comment that had said, "Interesting song choice." Abby said, "Never in a million years would have meant this in a rude or disrespectful way. Just a fun trending song about flying first class. Very sorry if it came off that way, not my intent," with a broken heart emoji. The post is still up today, and in that combination of the post still being up and her response, what I imagine she's apologizing for is just that she didn't intend for it to hurt people's feelings. She's apologizing for that. It doesn't seem to be sinking in how this changed people's perceptions of the Tarte trip in general and also of her as a person. To me, I see this mostly as an eye-opener to who Abby is, and some people may see this as lighthearted and fun and she was making a joke. Chill out, bitch. Like maybe it might be that kind of reaction, but some people find it in poor taste. And I think at that point, people just need to decide whether they want to follow Abby or not, whether what they think that this says about her as a person, all of that. And some people are just going to be like, I really don't freaking care. I just don't care. But what I think the reaction to Abby's video did do was I think it gave a window into how people are feeling about these brand trips in general. And I think the general feeling, taking Abby out of it, is just that people are just tired of it. But it wasn't always like this, with this cycle of brand trip, backlash, icky feelings, maybe some purchases, another brand trip, icky feelings, backlash, maybe some purchases, over and over and over. It wasn't always like that. Brand trips used to be quite a bit different, and we are going to use a very specific example from 2011, the Sigma and Paris brand trip. Let's talk about how that was different than what we see today. One of the advantages that I have from being on this platform for so long is that I've met a lot of people, and I am so grateful and so thankful to have these connections. And one of the connections I've had for a very long time is Simone from Sigma. Until last week, I had only communicated with Simone through email, back and forth, email. We almost got to meet one time, but then that didn't happen. And we finally got to meet last week. I was at Creators and Friends, which is an influencer trip that's a little different that we're going to talk about closer to the end of this video. But what I need you to know right now is that Simone and I were sitting talking back at the back of the room while this thing was going on. There was a party game going on, and it just wasn't really my jam. So I ended up just giving the fake money that I had to other people so that they could play. And I just sat and I talked with Simone. And as I was talking with her, she brought up that she had done a brand trip back in 2011 to Paris with a few influencers. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting. Now, for some perspective, 2011 YouTube was very different than 2024 YouTube in that it was literally just people filming in their bedrooms, basically on a potato. The camera quality was not so good. The backgrounds were usually bedrooms. Sometimes there was clothes on the bed, open closets, things like that. I mean, it was literally just people in their houses talking about makeup tips and tricks and things like that to try to help people be better at makeup. It was not glamorous like it can be today. And in that, the brand trip that Simone planned was not a super glamorous trip. It was a trip to Paris for an art project. Literally for an art project. She flew out influencers Christina, Makeup by Tiffany D, Dulce Candy, Leisha from X Sparkage, Jen from Head to Toe, Josh from Peachrelude, and Susie from MAC NC40 to Paris. And the goal was to work together to create a Paris-themed eyeshadow palette. So like I said, because I've been in the space for a long time, I know Leisha. I did a collab with Leisha a few years ago, so I reached out to Leisha and I was like, oh my gosh, you were on this trip. Tell me about it. Can you send me a voice note to use in my video to tell everybody what it was like to go on this very early in YouTube beauty brand trip? So here's Leisha.
My name's Leisha, also known as X Sparkage, former beauty content creator. And I was on one of, if not the first beauty creator brand trip that had happened, as far as I know, with influencers. This was to Paris in 2011, and it was absolutely magical. This was with Sigma, and it was really, really cool. The owners of Sigma, Renee and Simone, are so, so nice. And the whole point of the trip was to create a themed palette where each of us got to create an eyeshadow that was inspired by a different famous place in Paris. Mine was Versailles. I got to have a photo shoot done there. It was really, really cool. And we got to go to all of the different famous places. We went to Versailles, Arc de Triomphe, Eiffel Tower, Champs-Élysées. I'm probably saying these wrong. Where else did we go? I'm trying to remember all of the different places. We went to so many different places. When we got there, we got on like what can only be described as a top model tour bus. It was just really cool. We got to stay in a really nice hotel. Everything about it was just a dream. This is also before social media really popped off. There was still obviously social media, but it was not nearly the minefield I feel like it can be today. So there was no drama on this trip. There was no issues in that regard. It was just a really, really good time. And I have nothing but good memories with that entire trip. It was very fun to be able to truly get to create a palette that we all got to have our own say in. We all got to have a really fancy photo shoot. We all got to choose the color and really be inspired because we were going to the place that each of the colors were inspired by. We were getting to, make tweaks and really make it our own. So, I mean, it was just magical. I have so many good memories from that trip, and it's also just really cool to think back and be like, that was the beginning of something just huge.
I also reached out to Simone and asked her some questions specific to this brand trip. And I had asked her what was the motivation for doing a brand trip? Why did she want to do that? And this is what she said. I really was just very inspired by Paris and wanting to bring my favorite influencers on the trip, do a tour of the most famous monuments, and let them be inspired and create their perfect shades. To me, it was an art project, and I feel that in the end, it was an art project for them as well. But unlike trips now that are shared shared in real time through TikToks or Instagram stories, they were not allowed to post about it. This happened back in September of 2011, but they weren't allowed to post anything about it until the spring of 2012 because that was when the palette was launching. And like Leisha was saying, what they did was each one made their own individual eyeshadow inspired by the place that they were assigned. As far as the return on investment, I asked Simone directly. I said, did you get, as a brand, everything out of the brand trip that you had wanted? And she said, absolutely. It was a very genuine and authentic project from both sides, from us and from the influencers. I was coming from a place of genuinely being in love with the idea of creating a palette inspired by Paris. And the group that came along was amazing. Some were friends already and all had a blast together. It was an amazing experience. And 12 years ago, an influencer trip was unheard of. I want to say we were one of the first brands to do a project like this. Being an influencer was a new job. It was a job that hadn't previously existed. So the people that were doing it didn't really know how to handle things like this. And in that, it would have been very easy for Sigma and Simone to take advantage of these influencers financially, in that they could have paid for the trip, given them some, 10-15% commission on sales, and left that at that. But Leisha said it wasn't like that at all. She told me through text message that not only did they get the free trip, they were also paid a flat rate. They were also given a commission percentage and a bonus if they sold a certain number of palettes. And what this reminds me of is, do you remember when Nikki Tutorials collabed with Too Faced and she had signed a contract that she didn't realize wasn't fair to her? And essentially everyone kind of agreed that Too Faced had taken advantage of Nikki and reaped the huge benefit of having Nikki design a palette for them. There was a lot of layers to that situation, but that's what that kind of reminds me of. And that's the way I feel like Sigma could have treated these influencers, but it sounds like they didn't, and that they truly valued the brand relationship that they had with them and wanted them to be paid fairly. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm like, why don't brands do this kind of thing anymore? And after pondering on it for a while, kind of where I landed on it is because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time having each individual influencer create an individual eyeshadow where they had the opportunity to edit things. They had to work together to make sure that the palette was cohesive. They ended up voting on the different brush shapes that would be in the palette because it contained a face brush and an eye brush. They also discussed what the blush shades were going to be like. And remember, this is pre-Zoom. Like they must have communicated through email. I didn't ask the specific question because I'm just thinking of it now. Like, how did they coordinate all of that back before Zoom? But somehow they did it. And in 2024, this would be easier than it was back then, I'm imagining, but brands don't do it because now the way that they do it is they just kind of create a product like the Tarte Shape Tape, let's say, and then they give the influencers the product while on the trip, and then the influencer creates content for the brand based on that product launch. There's no back and forth. There's no wait time. There's no creating of a beautiful pamphlet with all of the influencers' faces in it and taking photos and having a photo session in front of the Eiffel Tower. Like, there's none of that anymore. But what I see as the benefit of that kind of thing is that the influencer is more connected to the final product, and therefore the audience will be more connected to the final product and maybe more likely to purchase. Because if we're going to be honest about all of these things, about every brand trip, about every brand experience, about PR, about all of that, the goal of everything is sales. It is selling the product to you, to the viewer. It is convincing the viewer to buy the thing. That is the end goal for all of this. So let's dive a little deeper into that piece. Does this kind of marketing, convincing you to buy this, does the brand trip still work? In a New York Times article about the Bora Bora trip, they interviewed Maureen Kelly, who is the CEO and founder of Tarte. This is what she said. "We found the investment in these relationships to be more valuable in the long term than spending millions of dollars on one-off media campaigns." She continued, "For me, the aha moment came when I was looking at the sales," she said. "It works. The sales are there." But what may come as a surprise to you and came as a surprise to me is that Maureen says that there are no posting requirements for a Trippin with Tarte trip, that any post that you see is made voluntarily by the people who go. Because what this trip does is it gives the opportunity for the creator to create content and then earn off of that content. And of course, the more lavish the trip is, the more spectacular it is, the more fantastic and amazing it is, the more the influencers are going to want to film it and share it with their audience for that appearance of opulence, the Kardashian effect, the wanting to live vicariously through the influencer. The more of those opportunities there are for some people, it makes them look cooler to have been invited to this trip, and they're going to be more likely to share. If they're more likely to share, then logically you would think that that leads to more sales for the brand. And it doesn't even have to be immediate sales. It could be like a commercial. We see a commercial and it says, that this hairspray is the best hairspray ever, and then a month later you see it in the store and you're like, oh, I heard somewhere that was the best hairspray ever. Like, I can't remember, maybe I'll buy it, because you don't remember that you heard it in an ad from an influencer. So it's one of those things that they may not get the payout immediately, but they may get it down the line just because of a positive association. And even though I've heard a lot of negative in my particular community about feedback regarding brand trips, it's important to know that there is a good chunk of people that still love brand trips. I read an article, and in that article, they interviewed a woman named Amani Blackman, and she works for a clothing company in Anaheim, California. She said regarding the trips, I personally get excited just because I do love to see all the glam and glitz. I watch the Kardashians. I love award shows and all of that because you kind of get to escape your reality of your personal life. And when people criticize Tarte specifically and the Trippin with Tarte for being out of touch, she says back to that, I personally don't think it's out of touch. I think people are upset that they're not there. And at this point, I really want to know what you think about that particular piece. Do you think that people are upset that they're not there? Is that why people don't like brand trips? Or is it something else? Personally, I think that it's two factors. First, I don't think that compared to years ago when, let's say, Tarte Shape Tape launched, or even when Sigma did their trip back in 2011, I don't think that the quote-unquote parasocial relationship is as strong as it used to be. We used to get excited because someone that we like as a person got to do something cool. We were emotionally attached and invested in this person. I don't think that's as strong now, especially with TikTok, when you're just scrolling and scrolling and you see someone familiar, but you don't really know who they are. Like, you're just, casually watching their content, but you may not feel that same connection that you once did to content creators, especially the creators that are invited on these trips, the ones with large platforms. Seeing these brand trip videos used to give the feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for them. They get to have this experience. That's so cool that they get to do this. That's really neat. And now it's like, well, they're going on a brand trip and they're going on the brand trip to promote a product that they want me to buy so that the brand can make more money and then they can go on more brand trips. That's really the purpose of it. Because the second point that I want to make is it's kind of a Wizard of Oz moment when we realize that the wizard is just a man. When we pull the curtain away and realize that a lot of these influencers that go on these trips, the ones that have high sales, the reason why that they have high sales is because they're salespeople.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
They're not as invested in their communities. I'm not saying everybody. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everybody because I don't know everybody. But there's that feeling of sales instead of that feeling of I genuinely want to tell you whether this product is good or not so you can decide whether you want to spend your money on it. The curtain has been moved and now we can see exactly what the motivation might be for some of these people, and the sales may be going down because of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, we can still be happy for the people that go on the trip and happy that they get to have that experience, but it may not translate into me wanting to now buy that product.
Expectations.
I want to step away just for a second from the focus of this video to kind of a side point, because I read this Reddit thread and it was interesting because there were parts of it that made me go, yeah, I agree. And then there were parts of it I was like, that's not quite, no. It's not quite how that works. And it had to do with a post on Reddit. And the original poster's name was KY Pins. And they said that if they were an influencer, they'd do less brand trips and more sponsored posts because the money they could earn off the sponsorships would be tremendously higher than the value of the brand trips. And I do see where she's coming from on that if you are a very large creator, because some of these very large creators can earn $10,000 on one post. The cost of going to Bora Bora is most likely less than the $10,000 that they would earn for one post. But that is not the vast majority of people that are out here posting content, let me just tell you. That has not ever been true for me. I can tell you that just from my personal perspective. But I can see that point of view if you're talking about a very large creator who is getting this free trip in order to post for free. Therefore, they're being paid in the trip and then the products that they get instead of getting the money outright in cash. That kind of makes sense. But this is when the post kind of takes a turn because it starts talking about tax write-offs, and they specifically say that basically that the brand trip is free for the brand because it is a tax write-off.
You write it off.
Who writes it off?
I don't know. The write-off people. What? Why are we having this conversation?
And this is the thing. Tax laws are confusing. So I get it. And you hear a little bit here and you'll hear a little bit there and you think that you understand something, but in reality you don't. And I have seen this in my comments over the years so many times. So I figured I would just take a second to explain how that works, just in case you were curious how tax write-offs just in general work and why it is not free for the brand because it's a write-off. Is it a write-off? Yes, but that does not mean that it's free. When people here in the US pay taxes, we pay based on the amount of money we earned in that year. So let's say we have a brand that made $1 million in a year. So decent sized company, but no way big. $1 million. They are in about a 20% tax bracket. So at the end of the year in April, when we have our tax day or sometime between January and April, they're going to need to pay 20% of that in taxes. So that's $200,000 they will need to pay. But let's say this brand spends $50,000 to bring 5 influencers to New York City. They can write that $50,000 off. So now when they go to pay their taxes, it is $950,000 of income that they are paying taxes on. We've taken that $1 million, we've taken the $50,000 away, and we are being taxed on that $950,000. So at tax time, they will save $10,000 in taxes by not having to pay the taxes on that $50,000. But they still have to pay for the trip. They still have to pay their taxes.
A write-off is a business expense used to reduce your taxable income.
Okay, well then why isn't it called a tax write-off?
It is! It is! You can't just buy things for yourself and write them off.
Going along with what the original poster on Reddit had said, they could be saving a significant amount of money paying for influencers to go on these trips versus paying per post, because just like on commercials that are on TV or on streaming services, a commercial on a YouTube channel costs money. So instead of paying that money upfront to the influencer, which is also a tax write-off, by the way, they take them on that trip. But what else they get from that besides the tax break at the end of the year, because it's not a money that they get to keep for free, it's just a break. They also get to establish this relationship with the influencers. They get to make them feel special by putting them in these luxurious situations with these beautiful rooms and these private jets and things like that, and making them feel super special so that maybe this influencer won't talk about that concealer that really sucks. Or maybe they'll create content for this brand rather than this other brand that hasn't given them that experience. And even more, maybe they'll just happen to bring up some of their favorite products from that brand versus another one. That's where a lot of that return on investment really comes. But even with all of that, there is no guarantee that a beauty brand trip will earn a net positive for the brand. What determines the net positive for the brand? Like we mentioned a little earlier, it's sales. It's you buying the product because you saw the influencer posting about it. Let's delve a little deeper into how you affect what's happening with these trips. An article in Business Insider that was published on March 16th of 2024 was titled, "Gen Zers Want You to Know They Are Sick of Extravagant Influencer Brand Trips." In the article written by Lindsay Dodgson, the message is in the intro of the article. The generation that has grown up with social media says the lavish lifestyles of the internet's rich and famous no longer thrill them. And affluence, it seems, just doesn't represent what they aspire to anymore. Social media marketer and content creator Katya Varbanova told Lindsay that Gen Z instead values authenticity, sustainability, and ethical consumption over glamorous brand trips, going even further to say some of these trips symbolize the disconnect between the brands they support and their personal values. Now, this article focuses on Gen Z, but I feel like this is applicable to a lot of people across generations. I don't think this is specific to Gen Z. I think people are just more aware the purpose of these brand trips is really to get you and me, the people who are not on the trip, to cough up money to then fund these trips. Taria Sherman is a TikToker and she talks about pop culture. This is what she said about these kinds of situations. A lot of people's dollars are just stretched thin. People are really getting sick of these corporations making millions, even billions of dollars off of the working people and rewarding people that already have money. From Taria's perspective, it is the consumer who is encouraging these brand trips to continue by watching the videos and then purchasing the product. I do agree with Taria that a lot of people are looking at money differently now than they were 4 years ago. And as you're scrolling social media and you're seeing all of this opulence, you may be personally sitting on your couch thinking about your own bank account and how you're getting closer and closer to that uncomfortable zone, or you're already in that uncomfortable zone where you can't just spend because an influencer told you to. You just can't. And then seeing them try to convince you while they're in this luxurious environment, trying to convince you to part with your money, your hard-earned money, that you really don't have a lot of extra, it can make you feel just icky. And in that, it could have the opposite effect on the person watching, in that maybe they don't like the influencer quite as much, or they don't like the brand as much. And I personally feel like this is going to be a bit of a downturn on the return on investment for brands that do these luxurious trips. I could be wrong there though. I haven't seen their financials. I don't know exactly what is going on there, but it's just a feeling that I have based on people that I've talked to and based on my own personal situations. So if this is the way that things are going, how can beauty brands continue to do things like brand trips with the ebbs and flows of how society feels about them? In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I feel like the way brand trips could continue to be and not give as much of that cringe, that ick factor, would be to have some kind of purpose to the trip other than just selling a product. So maybe it's something that brings awareness to something within the brand ethos. So for example, Topicals just did a trip to Ghana that did just that. Or maybe it's exploring a different part of the world and seeing the beauty of another place, like the Sigma and Paris trip. Or maybe it's about building community, and that was what Creators and Friends was all about. Like I mentioned earlier, I did just come back from New Orleans from a creator trip, not a brand trip, but a creator trip called Creators and Friends. And I do believe, I am definitely biased, I will tell you I am biased, but I do believe that this is the future of brand trips. And let me tell you why. There are quite a few reasons. The first thing is, like I was saying, the motivation for the trip isn't to sell products. That's not why we went. That wasn't the purpose. It was never presented to be the purpose. It may happen because of the trip, but it's secondary. The primary reason for the trip was to foster community between coworkers, is what it comes down to. Because let's just be honest, people in my life don't know anything about what I do overall. Very few people in my life actually watch my videos or ask about my videos. Like, nobody cares, like legit. Nobody cares. Nobody knows what I do. I mean, some people know what I do, but very few people. It can be a very lonely job in that we're sitting in a room and nobody around us really understands what we do. So it's nice to be in a room full of people that understand what I do, that know the feeling of losing data on a memory card, and all those little nuances. Every job has them. When I was waiting tables, it was the nuance of having a pen and how important it was to have a pen. Every job has its little things. And with content creators, I feel like we have our little things that only we get. And you probably have that in your job as well. So that was number one. That is the main reason for Creators and Friends, is to foster that community. And the secondary reason is the interaction with brands. But the interaction is different because it isn't a brand trip. The brand isn't sponsoring everything. You don't have one brand kind of taking over everything. So let me just explain quickly how the dynamic works. So if you haven't watched any other vlogs, basically we pay our way to get there. We plan to pay for where we're staying. When we sign up and say we're going to do it, we have to pay a deposit that, pays for where we're staying. What has happened in the past is that a brand then picks up the tab for where we're staying and we get a refund for the cost of the accommodations. In addition to that, brands can sponsor individual pieces. So it may be a dinner by a certain brand or an activity with a certain brand, things like that. But overall, it is not sponsored by one brand. The major sponsor of this trip to New Orleans was Sigma. The one to Charleston was BK Beauty. But again, it wasn't all about just that one brand. So for example, Surratt was a sponsor of one of our meals. It was incredible, really, really delicious food. But after that, they did a little presentation about the history behind Surratt, what kind of brand ethos is, what they believe in. And then they gave us some product. And I will be 100% honest with you. I have never had any interest in buying Surratt. They have never had any interest in me because they're above my price point. They're not anything that I would typically buy, and I'm not really doing a whole lot of reviews right now, so there's no reason for them to give me product. But that being said, I'm very interested, now that I've tried some of these products, to at least share that information with you about how these products perform. And the benefit for Surratt is that this wouldn't have happened. I never would have had these products in my hand had it not been for them participating in Creators and Friends. And I know a lot of you are in the same, wanting to spend the same amount as I am, but I do have some cross audience with people like Khaki Reviews Beauty or with Michelle Wong, who does luxury makeup. I mean, I have some crossover, so I know some of you are going to be very interested in hearing a little bit more about those products. And my point is that I am organically going to share those with you. Anything that I post is bonus for them. They're not paying me to do it. They're not expecting me to do anything. I'm only going to talk to you about it if I genuinely have something to say. And that makes it more authentic. That makes it more real. That makes it more relatable. That makes it, what I have to say about it, more important, rather than, this brand trip was sponsored by this particular product, so I have to share it with you. The other benefit of doing something like Creators and Friends is the size of the platforms that we have. So we are all either mid-tier creators or smaller creators. No one is a huge creator that was there for either one of these trips. The benefit of having people our size involved in a trip is that we talk to our subscribers. We read what people have to say. Once you get to a certain level, a lot of people just don't participate in their comment sections anymore. But a lot of us still do. So we still have that connection. We have our live chats we do every Sunday. There's other people that have other ways of connecting with their subscribers. And overall, I feel like a lot of people at our size are more trusted than a lot of people that tend to go on brand trips. Therefore, it could possibly generate more sales because you all know we aren't going to talk about something being amazing when we know for a fact it absolutely isn't. So in case you haven't picked up on this, I freaking love Creators and Friends. I think that it's a fantastic idea, and I would not be surprised if more events weren't planned like this by companies like Magic Links, Reward Style, those affiliate link companies. If they were smart, they would organize similar trips. Will big brands pick up this kind of format? Highly unlikely, in my opinion. But I do strongly believe that it would be a good idea to have some kind of purpose to the trip, rather than just this. And at this point, my friend, I would love to know what you think on this topic in the collective brain of Makeup Awesomeness, where we help each other not to buy crap and also talk about things that are happening in the industry. One of my favorite things to do is read your thoughts down in the comment section down below. I would love to know any and all thoughts. Do you think that the format of brand trips will ever change? Do you think it should change? Or do you think it's absolutely fine the way that it is? I would love to know any and all thoughts down in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my take on brand trips. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It makes me look super cool, and also it tells YouTube to share it with more people so more people have the opportunity to click on the video if they would like. And again, if you enjoyed this kind of content, I do this kind of stuff all the time, hit the subscribe button so that my videos then pop into your subscription feed. And if you are not ready to go, I get it. I like my content too. Over here, there's going to be 2 videos for you to choose from. The bottom one I'm picking for you. YouTube is picking the top one based on your current viewing history. But if you do need to go, I get it. You got stuff to do. You're busy. It's no problem at all. Thank you for hanging out as long as you did, and I'd love to you, and I will see you in a video very soon. Bye!